Okay, great. So thank you, Federica, for that nice introduction. I'm going to talk to you this morning about the plans for early science with LSST. This is a presentation, a piece of work that's been worked on and contributed to by quite a lot of people. Bob and Phil have had a lot of important contributions to this, as well as several other people on the project. I'd like to run this morning's session as quite interactive. I've found previously when giving these talks, there have been a lot of questions around early science, and what I don't want to do is go through 25, 30 odd slides and get to the end and have everyone hold their questions. So I think at points during this, I'm going to pause and ask for questions and see if there are any questions on Slack, because there are a lot of natural points during this where we could stop and have a discussion. So please don't feel shy about asking questions and starting a discussion around this topic. Oh, okay. That's probably going to move forward again. Is it going to stay there? I think it's going to stay there, but I clicked it a few times. Okay. All right. Okay. So there's been a bit of confusion, I think, around what is early science? What is the definition of early science? And I did set up a early advanced question form to try to solicit input from people. Thank you to those of you who sent in questions. And one of the most common questions is, what is early science? How do we define it? This is the definition of early science. Feel free to take this slide, use it, quote it. It is defined as any science enabled by Rubin for its community through and including the first data release, and that's data release 1. So for those of you who are part of the DP0 program, that falls under early science. Data release 1 itself, which is based on only the first 6 months of data and released 1 year after the start of operations, is considered an early data release. And so it's also part of the early science program. And we'll have a look in a minute at all the different components of early science. But this is the statement of what is early science. So why are we doing this? Why don't we just wait until we've got 1 year of data and then start doing science? There's a lot of anticipation, excitement around LSST data. So we want to enable high impact science prior to the first data release. We don't want people to have to wait 1 year and after we start operations. There's a lot of things that could be done before the first data release. The early science program is designed to provide early access to both static sky and time domain science ready data products to support the community. This will help the community not only start to do science, but to prepare their analyses for when they do get a full year of data to work with. The LSST data is that there's going to be very large volumes of it. It's going to be very different, and it's important to start preparing early if we really want to exploit the data when it arrives. And finally, third motivation for this is to enable time domain astronomy via alert production during commissioning in the early year of operations. This is the motivation for this is that alert production, which produces the prompt data products and runs in the nightly processing between the 60-second alerts and the 24-hour prompt products, requires templates because it's based on difference image analysis, and we won't have templates until we've done a full data release. So we're going to have a lot fewer templates in year 1. In fact, in principle, we might have had none had we not put in place an early science program. So the early science program has as one of its focuses to try to build up a template library early based on commissioning data and some early data in order to do some sort of alert production prior to data release 1. Okay, so what are the elements of the early science program? We have a series of data previews. Many of you will be familiar with these already. In fact, many of you are DP0 delegates. These are based upon reprocessed data taken during the Rubin Commission Observatory period. Data preview 1 is going to be a release of the ComCam data, all the data taken with the commissioning camera that Robert and Sandrine talked to you about yesterday, reprocessed with one version of the science pipelines and released through the LSST science, the Rubin science platform. Data release 2 similarly will be based on the LSST camera data, the full science camera, and data release 1, as I've just mentioned, is the first 6 months of data taken during operations. I haven't mentioned DP0 here mainly because it's based on simulated data, and it's sort of really a trial for us to get going, stand up our services and start to get the community engaged. But many of you will be familiar with DP0, and I think many of you are already actively working with it. Template generation, as I've just mentioned, prior to the start of regular survey operations based on data collected during commissioning with the LSST science camera is also a key component of the early science program. We will do this to try to maximize the number of templates available in order to do some degree of alert production during the first year of the 10-year survey. And then a final part of this is what we call incremental template generation, whereby rather than waiting for the first data release processing to generate the templates from the year 1 data, as soon as we have sufficient images for a given pointing and filter that pass quality cuts, we will, outside of a data release processing, generate templates and then start to use those during year 1 and build up incrementally the number of alerts that we can release during the first year. I might just stop there and ask if there are any questions on what is the early science program and about the components of it. Is anyone monitoring Slack? No? If there are no questions, I'll just go on. I hope that's clear to everyone. Okay, so I think Sandrine showed you this yesterday. This is the commissioning data collection timeline. Obviously, what we can do in early science is very dependent upon commissioning, how we progress through commissioning, the data that's taken. So there's this period of system integration here. Then there's a period of on-sky engineering before we go into system optimization and science validation surveys. And we anticipate that the majority of templates that we will be able to use to build, the majority of images that we can use to build templates prior to year 1 will come out of this system optimization phase and the science validation phase here. And so we will work together quite closely with the commissioning people to try to optimize these activities without obviously compromising commissioning to build templates that can be used in the early part of the survey. So as I've just mentioned, how early science materializes is going to be very dependent upon commissioning. And so in order to try to plan for success and to take into account the various different possible outcomes from commissioning, we considered 2 scenarios. The first scenario is whereby the full commissioning plan, as I just presented, is executed. This includes system optimization, science validation. It's very successful. The operations and the operations readiness review, the end of construction passes. So the complete plan is executed. Then, as we move into the operations phase, the operations team would carry out an operations readiness review or an operations rehearsal in which we would carry out a full dress rehearsal of science operations to demonstrate that we're ready to execute the 10-year survey, and then go straight into executing the 10-year survey. And we would make use of the data collected during the commissioning period, during the science validation phase to generate templates. And then we would also use the data collected during the SV surveys to put out data preview 2. So while we're starting operations, we're also processing in the background all the commissioning data and releasing data preview 2. We expect data preview 2 will be released something like 6 months following the completion of the SV surveys. And that's the time we expect that we will need to process that data and to do QA on it. We will, of course, endeavor to push this out as fast as possible. We won't wait for 6 months, but we're just giving ourselves a time period of 6 months to get this done. So that's the scenario we all hope is going to happen. That's the very successful scenario. But in the case that on-sky time in commissioning is reduced, which is a possibility as the construction work comes to an end, there is a possibility that maybe the science validation surveys would not be completed prior to the end of the construction phase. If this is the case, the operations team, as its first activity when we enter operations, will spend up to a maximum of 3 months prior to commencing the 10-year survey to carry out the remaining program of science validation surveys. We would then do follow on exactly as in scenario A. We would complete those surveys. We would do an operations rehearsal. We would process the data to release DP2, and which would include the same data products as planned in scenario A. So the only real difference here would be a time delay in releasing DP2. If some of the science validation work didn't get completed in construction, we would complete it as part of the first phase of operations. In previous versions of the thinking about early science, we did throw around the idea of running a special early science program or a template generation program or observing a different part of the sky. We've decided not to do this and to simplify the plan and to just say, we will complete the science validation surveys. If they're not completed, operations will complete them, and then we will move straight on to the 10-year survey and reduce data preview 2. Are there any questions around that?
Maurizio Paolillo on how about using external data to build templates?
We have considered that. We currently are not planning to go down that route. We're planning just to use data that comes from the LSST camera.
So it's Meg Schwam, Queen's University Belfast. It's more, I guess, combination question comment. This is really much clearer, I think, than the PCW. For me, this makes a lot more sense. So I really appreciate the simplification and the clarification. I just wanted to, I guess, maybe ask a clarifying question. So this means the science validation surveys would not be cut or diminished in any way if they get pushed into operations. They would be completed as is, and that's the 3 months, or would that, you know, if that the limit you're saying of 3 months is the total time to complete them, or are you saying that there might be cut short if?
No, we would complete the science validation surveys as defined for commissioning in the event that they don't get completed during the commissioning phase. We say 3 months just because we want to time box this, and because that's roughly, I mean, the science validation surveys are planned for 8 weeks at the moment. There's 2 surveys within this 8 weeks. So we think that 3 months is more than sufficient with a small amount of margin, but we do need to time box this. I mean, we're not going to carry on for a year.
A comment on the previous question. Building, I don't know which kind of templates Maurizio is talking about, but there is work about building light curve templates based on ZTF and DECAM data for auxiliary stars, and comparing with pulsation models colored with the LSST bands. This is ongoing, but there is something like this at work.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think we'll follow up on that. We took an initial look at this and decided it probably wasn't the best way to go, but yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was talking about image templates. You're talking about that, right?
So what we're talking about are images of the sky so that we can do image subtraction, so that we can detect.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. I made.
But actually, I have a comment, which is when you say we'll start with the 10-year survey, I just want to point out that the first year of the survey may itself be different from the other 9 years. Yeah. So that doesn't mean that we will implement the plan that will stay in place for the rest of the survey.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've probably covered this, but I wanted to include this in the slides for clarity, just some key points. And Meg has just alluded to this. The contents of DP2 will be exactly the same, irrespective of whether scenario A or scenario B materializes. So we will not do any more, we will not do any less. We will complete the SV surveys as planned and release data preview 2. The only difference now between the 2 scenarios will be the timing of the release of DP2 and hence the start of the 10-year surveys. That's it. In both scenarios, we assume that the construction project delivers an integrated system that can capture, transfer, and process science-grade data at the time that full survey operations begins. I think if that's not the case, then we're probably going back and saying maybe we haven't completed construction. Both scenarios will include alert generation of some type. The details are still to be defined and will be defined probably during the commissioning period. The major distinction between the 2 scenarios would be with the relative availability of templates in time, sky position, and filter. And that's something that I think will become more clear as we move through commissioning. And as I've just said, as we approach the full survey operations, a lot more details will become clear and we'll have a clearer idea of which scenario we're going into, and then we will start to plan the details accordingly. All of this is written up in a document called RTN 11, a roadmap for early science. We put out version 2. In fact, it's version 2.1. We made a very minor edit to it yesterday. This document, as you can see here, it's on Zenodo. It is citable. It is on Zenodo. It has a DOI. Please cite this in your research proposals. One of the reasons that we have created this document is to support the community as they apply for research funding to do early science. It includes everything I've just discussed and more, provides the plans for an early science program. It describes the early science data products, how we're going to implement template generation. It outlines the timeline for execution and how the community can get involved, and how you should cite this work in your research proposals. And this is a living document. We will continue to upgrade this. So as we move into commissioning, more things become clear. We will update this document, but the DOI will remain the same. This is the DOI here on Zenodo. It takes into account versioning, so you don't need to worry about changing that. This is a timeline. I think Sandrine showed this yesterday. Data Preview 1, so you're all working with Data Preview 0 at the moment. Data Preview 1 is expected for between March and July 2024. Again, Data Preview 1 is based on ComCam data. We currently are planning the LSST survey start between July 24 and March 25. And we expect Data Preview 2 to come out somewhere between January 25 and August 25. And then following that, Data Release 1 in somewhere between October 2025 and May 2026. And this timeline will continue to be updated. Somebody yesterday in a talk gave a link to the page where the dates will continually be updated, and this document will stay up to date with the project dates. So this is really, this slide here is really aimed at research proposers, PIs who are proposed for funding. This academic year grant and fellowship proposals will be for the 3-year early science period, so 2024 to 2026. And this is just a bit of guidance and recommendations to help you with your proposals for the first year period for FY24, financial year 24. This is an American thing. This is really a preparation phase, I think, for the community, and where the community will be able to work with DP1 data based on ComCam in late 2024. Then in 2025, this is when the survey will start, DP2 will come out, and then in 2026, this will be the first month of LSST data. So this is to sort of help guide you through proposing for funds to support your program. So what data products will you get? This is just a broad high-level overview of the data products. Yusra gave us a very nice detailed discussion yesterday of the science pipelines and the data products that will be run and that will be produced. The prompt products, this first one here, these are a product of nightly processing. They're based on difference image analysis. They include alerts, images, and catalogs. The alerts contain detections in difference images greater than 5 sigma. They include information about the source, associations with objects, and information about solar system objects. Each alert packet contains a science cutout image, a template cutout image, and a difference cutout image. These are contained within the alert packet. And these alerts are picked up by the brokers. We have 7 full stream community brokers and 2 further downstream community brokers that are working with our full stream brokers that are endorsed by the project. And if you want to access the alerts and these prompt products, you can work together with the broker. I know there are representatives from LASA in the room. There may be other people from broker teams here as well, I'm not sure. In terms of images, you'll get single visit images, difference images and template images. Catalogs, you'll have the source object and solar system object, as well as force source catalogs based on difference image analysis. The prompt products database update timescale is 24 hours. So every 24 hours, based on the nightly processing, the data products will be recomputed on that previous night's data and updated in the 24-hour database. Then there's the static science data products, the data release data products that come from DP1 and 2 based on commissioning and SV surveys, and data release 1 based on the first 6 months of data. This just gives you a high-level view of the data release and preview schedule. You can see data preview 0 here, 0.1 and 0.2. These are in progress already. So for DP 0.1, DP 0.1 and DP 0.2 are based upon the DESC DC2 simulated data set. It's been really good working with DESC. It's been great that they produce this data set that we've been able to use to to process and test our services. In DP0.1, we served up the desk processed data products, which were computed with version 19 of the science pipelines. I think Yusra went into detail about this yesterday. This just included raw images, visit images and catalogs, co-added images, and object and force source catalogs. In DP0.2, we took those images and we reprocessed them again with version 23 of our science pipelines. And in addition to the DP0 data products, we now have DRP produced difference images and DIA sources, DRP force source catalogs, and DIA outputs. And sorry, that's all. Yeah. And this is what people are working with now as part of the DP0. When we move into ComCam on Sky for DP1, we will then start to include some of the prompt products databases, so the visit images, the difference images, catalogs, as well as canned alerts. So this means that we will produce alerts, we will make them available for the brokers to work with, but they won't meet the 60-second latency period, not at least in the ComCam era. Then for DP2, we'll have all of our data products available except for the solar system catalogs. So this will include live alerts for DP2. And then in DR1, this will be the first release where we have absolutely everything for our data products. Ed, any questions coming in? No? Okay, great. So it's a very easy way to cite the data products. We've produced, Melissa Graham, in fact, has produced, she's the lead community scientist. She produced a very short note and a recording, which is called the Rubin Data Products Abridged. It is also on Zenodo. You can see here it has a DOI. Please go and cite this DOI if you want to look at it. It's an introduction to the data products of quite a high level and short and concise introduction to the data products in the Rubin Science platform. It's very useful to tell proposal reviewers what Rubin will provide and hence what you will still need to develop as part of your research proposal. This was one of the areas where we found it was a little bit confusing for people proposing because they were getting feedback from agencies saying, well, hang on, doesn't Rubin provide that? Or why should I fund you to do this because Rubin's doing this? This document here, the goal is to make it very clear what we do provide, so you can use that as a clear basis to justify why you're proposing to do further analyses and generate additional data products. Okay, any questions on that? Is anything coming in?
Actually, perhaps I have a question on that. So when we made a plan for this, we were in very close contact with the US community, even with the agencies, and talked to them about what they needed. So the question is not so much for you, but for all the people who are not based in the US here. And it's an encouragement to review this and see if that supports your needs as well, because we have less visibility into what you need to get support from your agencies than we do from what the US community needs.
Yeah, that's a great comment. Thanks, Fed. Meg?
So I see lots of links to Zenodo and all these great resources. Is there an early science webpage on the lsst.org that I could go to find all of this?
No, it's not. We'll make one.
Okay.
There is an early science category on the community forum, but I think that we could also, that's a good idea. We can make a web page that has this, that links to this guiding document. There's links to all of these in RTN 11, but if we put a web page up and link to everything, that's a good idea. Thanks.
There's a question on Slack from George Beckett. How do prompt products PVIs differ from DPR PVIs? I didn't realize there would be any single visit images in the prompt products.
Yeah, is Yusra here? I might ask Yusra to respond to that. Thank you.
They're pretty similar in prompt products. The PSF model, the astrometric calibration, the photometric calibration of the PVIs are very simple. And then in the data release processing, we have more time to do the global calibration. And so they'll just be better calibrated.
Since we have time, I just want to ask one question because I was always super impressed and amazed by this delivery that you promised about 60-second alert. Is this, I mean, do you see some risks in this, or do you really, I mean, are confident that the team will manage to reach the 60-second promise? I mean, that's amazing.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm confident that we will get there. Maybe we won't get there on day one, but our stretch, so 60 minutes is 60 seconds, I'm sorry, is our design. But we do have, it's not a stretch goal, it's the other one. Our minimum goal is actually 2 minutes. And a few years ago, we conducted a sort of survey with the community to ask, what were your science drivers? This was part of the community broker workshop that I ran together with Fed back in 2019. We asked the community, what are your science drivers for 60 seconds? And we didn't find anything under 5 minutes, in fact. So given that our minimum goal is 2 minutes, maybe won't make 60 seconds instantly, but we're not worried about sacrificing science. But I am confident we will get to the 60 seconds. It's probably, it's going to, I think, be a case of what do we prioritize? If we don't need to get to 60 seconds instantly, but there are other things we'd like to prioritize, like the quality of the data products or the processing, we would focus on that and then get to our 60 seconds. But I am confident we will get there.
Leanne, there's one more question on Slack by Mario Juric. What is the best way to send feedback to all these documents? If we notice something missing, could we possibly be added by the November 15th deadline for the NSF?
Yes, great. Yes, thanks, Mario. So I think it's coming up in one of the slides. So first of all, on community, somewhere I have it. There. So we have a community forum, early science, early science. This was where I advertised the session LSD at Europe. Here's some ComCam key numbers. This was where I posted the latest updates to Techno. Please go here and ask questions. Please post your questions on community, post some feedback. Either you can continue in this conversation or you can start a new one. It doesn't really matter. But you can feel free to post your questions and start open discussions on community. And we will respond. We realize that there's a deadline coming up in terms of proposals for researchers, at least for some of the community, and we will endeavor to get these updates in very rapidly. Also, there is a, I'm not sure if it's on here, actually. I'm not sure if I put it in here. There is, I will find the details. There is a PI briefing set up for next week. I'll find the exact time. I forget when it is, where there's going to be, it's November 2nd. 8 a.m. Pacific, that's it. November the 2nd, I should have added a slide on this. We're going to have a set of open hours next week, November the 2nd, 8 a.m. Pacific, where several people from the early science team will be on a Zoom link, and you can come in and you can ask your questions and you can give feedback and respond to questions. And we've set this up in advance of the proposal deadlines to support the community.
It is posted on LSST community. If you look for RTN 11, is it 11?
Yes, it's RTN 11. In fact, this is an old snapshot before Phil made the new post, so you won't see it on this one. Yeah.
And I mean, the US community is very focused on November 15th because we have the American, the astronomy and astrophysics grants deadline from the NSF. But again, for the European community, if there are deadlines for grants that we should know about so that we can, you know,
let us
expect to be able to be ready to support you.
Yep.
Let us know.
Okay, so I'm going to just move on now to the data previews and how they're providing a path to operations. We've set these up to try to help scientists and students learn to use the RSP tools and data products. As you all know, the data volume from LSP is going to be huge, and mining this data set is going to be a really big task. So we don't want to just introduce you, the community, to our services, the Rubin Science Platform and the data products on day one when we open up the first data release. It'll be a big learning curve for you. So we're taking this sort of incremental ramp up to both to us so that we can scale up our services and we can provide a really good user experience for the community. And you can also learn how to use the data products and the tools. So I think I've mentioned this already about the 3 data previews and the dates. What I really wanted to mention here was how many participants. I've had quite a number of questions about who can join and how can people join, and is it limited? For DP0, we set the number at 600 just because we couldn't open it up to everyone initially. We need to scale up our services as well. We haven't reached 600 actually, and so there are still places if people wanted to join DP0. And as we continue through this program of data preview 0, 1, and 2, we will scale up the number of users such that everyone will have an account. Every data rights holder will have an account at the start of full operations. And I would encourage you to get in early and get in and start to have a look at these services and the data products and play with them and learn how to use them. Okay, I'm going to say a little bit about alert generation in year one. So we've reviewed how we're going to produce alerts in year one, because in the baseline, we didn't have any templates, so there wouldn't have been any alerts. And we decided that wasn't really ideal. So we're going to incrementally generate templates during commissioning and year one, using the best images available and covering as much of the sky as possible. So there are two components to this. One is the commissioning data templates, whereby we will take everything out of commissioning, build templates where possible from science quality commissioning data, and use them to generate alerts during year one. And then there's the build templates, the year one data templates, where we build templates progressively from data obtained during year one on some to be decided cadence. And we will do this outside of data release processing and then use them to generate alerts during year one. This whole topic this subject was a topic of study. It's in DMTN Data Management Technical Note 107, where we studied a variety of options for alert production for LSST operations in year one. And if you'd like more details, you can go into that document and have a look. So with commissioning data templates, where possible, if commissioning observations are agnostic to pointing and filter, we will work with the commissioning team to choose a pointing and filter that optimizes our building of templates in early science. So rather than just waiting and see what happened to get taken, we will try to optimize that during the commissioning period. And obviously, different science drivers lead to different prioritization strategies. The community, many people in the community have already been very active, in fact, in writing some of these research notes, which talk about how they would like to see templates collected in order to optimize early science. So, we've learned that Milky Way science prefers templates that cover the galactic plane. Time domain science prefers templates in multiple bands versus a single band for a larger area. Transient variable star science prefers templates in all bands in deep drilling fields. So there's a whole lot of things here to weigh up when we're trying to select, what templates, how we build templates during commissioning. And it's been really great to have this input from the community already in terms of these research notes. In terms of incremental template generation, this is just to say that we modified one of our requirements to make it a requirement on the project to generate templates outside of data release processing, so we don't have to wait for all the data from year one. To enable artifact rejection, templates will be built from at least 3 images in year one. In subsequent years, this will be 5 images, but we've loosened the criteria a little bit in year one in order to get more alerts out. Just to note, the templates are not necessarily built from the first N images that are collected. There will be quality criteria that are applied. During the first year, once we produce a template for a given sky position and filter, it won't be replaced until the following data release, even if we get more images for that pointing and filter during year one. This is really just a logistical concern and to avoid repeated baseline changes so that we know what we're processing during year one. So maybe I'll just stop there and ask if there are any questions on those topics before I move on to access.
No, that's fine. Nope, nothing.
No, okay. It's also so I can have a drink of water. Okay, so how do you access all this data? The early science data will be accessed exactly as for all the LSST data during operations, and that is via either the science platform or for alerts via the community brokers. So this is what I mentioned before. We have 7 full stream community brokers that have been selected by the project. We already have a first test alert stream that some of these brokers have been working with. And talking to a lot of these brokers, they're all working very actively on ZTF at the moment and doing very well. So I'm really confident that these brokers are going to be ready to go and we'll do a great job of taking our alerts and disseminating them to the community. There are 2 downstream brokers as well. SNAPS is very focused on solar system science, and POI variables obviously on variable stars. And these are both SNAPS, I know, is working downstream of Antares, and POI variables I think also are working with Antares. So these are brokers that are already taking some of the full stream, applying some filters, and focusing on a very specialized region of science. So this is for all the alerts. And then for everything else, you will go through the Rubin Science platform. You can find a description here in LSE 319, which is the vision for a science platform that sits at the data centers next to the data to provide you, the community, with what we call next to the data analysis. And this means that you don't have to download petabytes of data onto your computer and try to analyze them, which would be a gargantuan task and very difficult. We will provide you with access to that data through the science platform with services, storage, and compute in order to run your analyses. And this shows you the landing page at the moment that is for the Rubin Science Platform as deployed at our interim data facility where DP0 is running. So many of you will be familiar with this. Okay, so just a bit of a summary. I think I've said most of this, but just to summarize, this is about strengthening your research proposal. What do you do to strengthen your research proposal? First of all, you cite Melissa Graham's abridged document on the data products to be very clear about what Rubin will provide and will not provide, and hence what you need to be funded to do. Then you cite RTN 11 for the data products expected in each of the DPs, as well as the timeline and all the details about the project. And then you can also leverage the Rubin Science, the Rubin and LSST Science Collaboration's resources. Describe your experience as a DP0 delegate, how your vision will enable your program. Describe your research program, how that enables, benefits from being embedded in a science collaboration. And also, do you have any in-kind contributions for your proposal, and how is any of this related? So these are all key elements that you can cite in your research proposals to help support your work. Okay, so early science observations and the survey cadence optimization committee. A question I've had a few times is, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I did have a question.
Okay.
Do you feel like with the set of brokers that have been set up, do you feel that you have a good understanding of whether anybody in the world will be able to get the alerts if they chose to?
Yeah.
Do you feel confident?
I feel very confident about that, but as I know there are some LASA people in the world, a couple of LASA people in the room might want to respond to that. In fact, it's running a broker, I'm not sure. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Bob?
I think I personally am very confident that the scientific professional research community, anyone in it will be able to get access to the alert stream. I think as we go forward, we're already hearing significant interest from parts of the broad public that are showing more interest in having access to data from the alert stream. And it's not clear to me yet how that can all be supported or will be. And a part of it will depend on the resources available to the brokers. And maybe someone from LASER wants to comment as well.
Our intention is to provide this to whoever wants it. We have we've been given a very powerful platform on which we're deploying our broker. The ISIS setup. ISIS, did I say ISIS? Iris, sorry, it's called Iris. So we have significant resources on the Iris system, which is our compute cloud infrastructure internal to UK science community. So we're confident that we'll be able to support the kind of queries that people want to do on our broker, we think.
Thank you. And there is a LASER talk tomorrow. Yes, could you introduce her?
Oh, sorry. My name is Ken Smith. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself on the on Slack. I am a software developer on the LASER broker, which is Queen's University Belfast and Edinburgh.
And you will speak about the LASER broker tomorrow in the European contribution session as well. Bob, there was some discussion also on Slack about data download. Do we want to address that as well? Bob and Leanne. Okay.
Okay, I'll catch up.
Yeah, just a quick comment that to say that Think has already is public platform, so you can test it. It's very easy.
Okay. As is
great.
As is Antara and others.
I think that the progress being made with these community brokers, I think, is really impressive, and I'm very confident that our community will have access to the brokers. Maybe another thing to point out is that a lot of the architecture and design focus of these brokers is quite different, and so they're approaching the problem from very different ways. I mean, Bubamul has a design that is very decentralized. Pit Google is a Google cloud-based version of it. So there are many different approaches as well to building these brokers, and they're different and complementary, and I think that's also going to help to serve the community, the full community well. Okay, I just covered that. All right. So one of the questions that we've had in the past, and I wanted to also clarify, is, will the early science program do anything that is different to what the Survey Cadence Optimization Committee has recommended in its baseline strategy? The answer is no, we won't. The Survey Cadence Optimization Committee is planning to deliver its phase 2 recommendations for the baseline in December this year. You can see the links here for their handout and their information. And we will work very closely with the SCOC to understand any impacts of optimizing the early science program and observations from early science. We will work with them. There will be no alternate program. There will be no parallel program. Everything will be folded in and part of the baseline observing strategy. The SCOC is going to continue to solicit input from the community on many aspects of the cadence, and this will also include some of the details of year 1 observing. Okay, so this is the community forum. I already showed this. So Meg, did you have a question? Did I see that hand? Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were pausing for questions here. I just wanted to ask about, in terms of the SCOC and how this is going to work in terms of how talking about these different aspects. It's very not clear to the community exactly how this is going to go. And given that this is the next year, it would be really helpful if this was very clear soon, so that of how this interaction happens. Because it seems like this is really just a little bit of feedback, and really operations is driving most of this. And so I think if there's a clear plan so that we know next year what's actually happening the year later, that'd be really, really helpful, because it still feels very nebulous. Like input, but what do you mean by input? And is that like the science communities are writing a proposal to the SCOC, or is that like you're at some point going to have a webinar? And so I just think having maybe some kind of webinar or something where you explain where the plan is and what the plan B is, right? As you said, in those 2 options. Sometime next year would be really helpful, I think, because that's my confusion right now is, what does that mean by recommendations and feedback, and what does that interaction actually look like?
No, that's a really good point. And we just haven't got there yet. It's just, and we will work with the SCOC over the next year, and we will address that point. So, but I'll say that, the research notes that you and others have written already have already been very useful, very informative. So this is the community forum. I've already presented this. Please do ask all your questions. Please go to community, ask all your questions, and come along to the open hours briefing next week. Again, it's the 2nd of November at 8 a.m. Pacific. So yeah, just as a bit of a summary of the timeline for early science decisions, a lot of this is very dependent upon commissioning, and we'll know quite a lot in a year's time, but we will check in every few months, and we will try to update you on what's happening. Be sure to track the cell. Someone has spoken about this already. I think it was Bob and Jelko. Track the celebratory milestones page and tech note to see how the survey is progressing. And I will just sum it up by saying early science is coming. We're only 2 years away. It's going to come very fast. So get ready. This is all designed to help you get ready for LSST data. And that's it. Thank you.
We have lots of time for questions and discussion, which is my favorite setup for a talk. Any questions right now in the room? And nothing online. Is there anything, Leanne, that you would specifically want to know from the European community versus the US community about all this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty good idea of how the US community has to orient its proposals and its funding and what they need from us in terms of information on various timelines, but I don't really have a good sense of how it works in Europe. So what do you need to know and when? And how can we support your proposals for grant money? Meg.
So partly you can't, because my proposal was due in February for the first 2 years of operation. So unfortunately, it's too late for me. But I have a proposal of how you can get this information is that you have context for every data rights community, right, with the MOUs. And so I'm wondering, is there some way that can be used to give you that feedback? So that you have that information and that can be arranged through those individual places, because the STFC deadline for the UK is always going to be, it's due in February, roughly for the rest of the year. And so I'm wondering if rather than the community, us posting on, community.lsst.org to give you that, if, since we have these natural links, because there's somebody who's head of those programs, maybe that's something that could happen, or some kind of regular communication of all the grant deadlines, that
Yep.
then you could have these workshops. Because it would have been great if I could have had this in January. But there was the document, some of the documents are already there, which I could link to, which was already very helpful.
Okay, it's a good suggestion. Thanks, Meg. We'll follow up on that. Fed, down the back.
I just wanted to say we can help with that in the in-kind office. So, well, get in touch with you, Leanne, and we'll coordinate something.
Great. Thanks, Aprajita.
So I think part of the problem is that, like the community altogether is very vast and very large, right? So
Yeah. Very diverse.
it would be great if we had like a calendar of proposals, but that would require you from your different communities to tell us when the proposals are. There's a question on Slack from Short. I'm curious about how to, I'm curious about how to identify galaxies in the early science data in the context of alerts, offsets to host galaxy. A bit of a loaded question. Short, if you want to unmute, we can try that. Meanwhile, I'm going to ask another question while Short tries to unmute from Nashika Chamba. Thanks a lot for your talk. Did any discussion of the Euro-friendly Slack Lab happen during the unconference?
So we didn't actually end up having an unconference because there were many other unconferences and there was just a lot of clash between it. I did have a bit of a chat with Sarah, and we are going to try to start to Sarah Benito, sorry, yes, Sarah Benito before she left. We are going to try to use a time slot called what's being called the third Thursday time slot that was set up by the community engagement team to see if we can start to seed a Euro-friendly Stat Club version here. So I think that just I mean, we recognize that the current Stat Club and delegate assembly time is not really the best time for Europe. There's no one time zone that's going to satisfy the entire world. So the approach we want to take is to help seed local communities to run their own Stat Club like events.
Actually, can you briefly describe what a Stat Club is in case anybody is not aware?
Okay, so Stat Club was set up a few years back now. It was by Greg Majeski and Alex Jellicoe-Wagner. It was set up with LSSTC Corporation funding to start to train people to use the stack. The stack is a colloquial term for the LSST science pipelines. And so they called it Stat Club. People just come together. They had accounts on the science platform when it was still running at the old data center at NCSA, and they just tried to use the stack, the science pipelines to access data, to access precursor data, to run analyses, to write notebooks. And they made a great start. They did a lot of analyses, and I think they've learned a lot. And this is sort of now merged a little bit in some ways with the activities of DP0. They're very similar. So what we have now is Stat Club still runs in its 9 to 11 slot on Friday mornings Pacific. And every second week, it runs every 2 weeks. And then the alternate week, we run the DP0 delegate assemblies, which are very similar in that they're also trying to train people to use the LSST science pipelines and the Rubin science platform to do analyses to access data. And so the Stat Club, with this support of the corporation and driven by Alex and Greg, produced a lot of really nice, and Phil Marshall as well was a big part of this. They produced a lot of really nice notebooks and demonstrators and examples that helped get the community going. And so we now still run them alternate to the DP0 delegate assemblies as a sort of much more informal, like, let's get on Zoom and let's all talk and try to use the data products, the science on the science platform.
And so this links back to the proposal subject, right? So this was initiated with a grant from the corporation.
It was.
And if you can identify a funding body that would be willing to support this, we can help you write a proposal and testify to the success of the US staff club.
Yeah.
So that you can get funded.
Yeah. So basically the idea now is to, is if there's sufficient interest to set up one that's in a Euro-friendly time zone, but would also be driven, I think, by the local community here,
Right, and
supported
local
by the community.
scientific
Yeah,
interests.
exactly.
Right.
So around the scientific interests of the local communities, but also supported by the project. I mean, we would still hope you would use the GitHub repos, the science platform, all the tools and infrastructure that we put in place, that we would still ask questions on community, continue to build a shared body of knowledge. And the community engagement team would certainly be very happy to support this, even though it'll be slightly unfriendly hours to start with, but to help support such a local community get started and to seed a local community so that you can become a self-sustaining stat club.
That's right. Short, I think Short is willing to unmute and clarify his question online.
Yes. Yeah. So sorry, it was hard to type it properly. So yeah, the context is when we did the CTF survey and we were in the early science phase, one thing that we really struggled with is to know if a transient comes from a star or a galaxy, which is very fundamental to how you organize your follow-up and filtering. Now, for Rubin, of course, when we are in full operations, we will know from data release 1 where the stars and galaxies are. But in the early science data, that we won't have that. So I can see some situation where all the brokers are scrambling with their own star galaxy separation based on some archival data. So I was curious if this is on your radar and if there's anything we can do to prepare to maybe have some sort of best case star galaxy separation for early science data based on the full sky and data that is available now.
So you will be able to have that based on the data in DP2, because that will have been processed and that will be made available, but that will only be for part of the sky. That certainly won't be for the whole sky. As for the rest of the sky, I mean, sorry?
I think the question is, when we have an alert, what static sky information we have
Yeah.
available. So it's, the rest of the sky doesn't matter. By definition, we have the deep data where we have the alert. So there is no other.
But we don't have a catalog.
Yeah, we will have the DP2 catalog with the data from commissioning, but that doesn't cover the whole sky is what I mean.
Right. So I guess.
And the alerts are generated from the templates generated in commissioning. So you will have that as a corresponding sky catalog.
Right.
Okay, great. So yeah, because you need reference to make alerts, for every reference image, we know where the galaxies are, and this information is available as a catalog, and then you can use it to cross-match.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so that makes things a lot easier. So thanks very much.
Yes.
Any other questions? We still have about half an hour of discussion.
So coming back to your other question, so the first answer I gave was, when are your research deadlines and so forth. Another thing that would be great to hear about is feedback about your experiences with DP0. Some of you come to the delegate assemblies already. That's great. We get a lot of good feedback. I know there are some people in the room who've given delegate presentations. They presented some great work. This is really interesting. But it'd be really good to get feedback on how are the services? How is the science platform? Are you able to do what you want to do? How easy is it to work with the data products? Do you understand the data products? Do all the columns and the fields make sense? Do you know what they mean? Things like this. It'd be great to get feedback on the data products and services coming out of these early science releases.
Maybe we can do a game and we can do a hand raised answer of people who are, or maybe since we do have some senior people here that I might expect not being on the DP0 themselves, but members of their group might be on DP0. How many people are DP0 delegates who are in this room right now? How many people have actually worked on the DP0 as delegates who are in the room right now?
Would anyone be brave enough to give us some feedback?
I see signals there in the other room. Nobody raised their hands. So But we do have room for more delegates, right?
We do have room for more delegates. We haven't reached our maximum assigned for DP0. And as at the moment, our services seem to be holding up very well, doing a great job.
Is the project thinking that they got out of the DP0, they're getting out of this DP0 what they were hoping to get out of the DP0?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think it's been extremely good for us. We've done a full reprocessing of the DC2 data set. So we exercise the science pipelines. We have loaded up, this is the largest catalog we've loaded up into QServe that we've served to a wide community. We have image services now as part of DP0.2. So you can query metadata about images. You can search for images. You can view images. The Butler's getting a lot of great use, which is good, Butler Gen 3. So we're certainly learning a lot from community usage of our services and data products.
And I want to make sure that I involve the people online. Can the people online raise their hands if they are DP0 delegates or if people in their group are DP0 delegates? We'll get a tally of, like a very rough tally of hand raised in a couple of minutes from my colleagues. In the meantime, Dominic had a question?
It's not a question. In fact, it was a comment about I am a DP0 delegate, sort of, and also part of the Rubin users committee. And I don't know if my comment is will be useful, but I think it just worked great. So no, I mean this this Rubin science platform is really impressive. We have also started to deploy the science platform at CCI 2B3. I deployed it also in my own lab, and it's something which is extremely complicated. I mean, there are a lot of services which are communicating to each other. So at the end, it is something which is extremely complicated. But
you mean the deployment is complicated, not the user?
Deployment.
The deployment. But I mean that when the things are running, you understand why it's complicated. It's not complicated in a useless manner. This is complicated because it needs to be complicated because it ultimately it will support 10,000 users and with all the security constraints. So at the end, this thing is really nice, and it works very well. And I think that what I did with DP0 data is just working. So, and another thing, you mentioned previously the Stack Club. This is an incredible resource. I mean, if you have questions that you are asking yourself about how you are going to do something, you can do something. Then you go to the Stack Club, and most of the time you will find the answer.
Great, that's really good. Don't underestimate the power of positive feedback. It's really nice to hear that.
Do we
I will pass it on to the science platform developers and to the initiators of Stack Club.
We had a handful of hands up on Slack about participation into the DP0.
About?
Just the DP0 delegates that identify themselves as such on the Zoom platform as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just want to mention that the AGN community feels a bit frustrated because DP0 data lack AGN. So
yeah. The DP0 data don't have every different type of object, clearly. You feel frustrated, so do the solar system science community. Yes, I see you, Meg. We had to start somewhere. I have to say, we had to start somewhere, and Desk provided us with a great set of simulated images to start with.
And I would tap on what Yusra said yesterday, right? So the idea of the DP0 was not to implement something so that somebody could do their own science, but it was to present the way in which the data will become available to people. Now, obviously, your specific data on your specific object, like once you actually get the data on your object, there will be differences. But I think it's a good piece. I mean, at the beginning, it didn't have really any variable source. It didn't have light curves, right?
That's right.
But
there aren't very many light curves either.
But it is useful to interact with the platform just to learn how to interact with the platform.
And the data products in the form that you will work with them when eventually there are AGN in the data set, they're still the same data products. I mean, they're still the same catalogs with the same format, the same schema. You can start to build your analyses and find zero AGN. So you can at least start to get experience with the format of the data products you're going to be working with.
Yes.
So my question is related to the reference images or the templates. You mentioned that you will apply cuts and use like 3 images to start with. So my question is, are the quality cuts different for different regions of the sky? Let's say the galactic plane will have like better seeing conditions or like,
We haven't defined the quality cuts that will be applied yet. I think this is something that we will do during the commissioning period. I don't think that they would be different for different regions of the sky. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we'll select images that go into the templates based on their seeing. Templates with better seeing perform a lot better in terms of minimizing false positives.
Yeah.
Right. I think maybe the point is some seeing cut may be sufficient for extragalactic non-crowded areas and still fail on the galactic plane. So maybe if I can channel your question, should I expect that you will be sensitive to this and that the galactic plane templates will also be sufficient quality, even though they only have 3 images?
It's not going to be an absolute seeing cut. It's a select the best seeing images that we have seen so far.
So it depends on the skies and the gods above.
the ones in the proper like data release, like when you have more images, like those will have like more carefully selected. But the initial ones for allowing early science, there will be like well, kind of like the best of the 5 or the 10 that you have on.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions? So I really appreciate that Leanne left a lot of space. Oh yeah, good, excellent. We'll keep the discussion going as long as it's running. Our break is not for another 20 minutes. If nobody has any elements for discussion, we'll break, but please feel free, anything go.
Okay, yeah, so regarding things that are not in DP0, as the same is true for LSB flux, that wasn't really inserted, but what I've been exploring
Can you unravel the acronym LSB?
Sorry, low surface brightness. So what I've been exploring DP0, I won't say using DP0, but I've been looking at is just the noise characteristics of the CCDs as expected to be in LSST cam, the synthetic skies that they're using in DP0, things like that. And then just making my own synthetic images with LSB flux to do my own tests. So that's actually been somewhat useful for me, just because I know not everything is going to be in DP0, but for the people whose science cases are not in there, they are the experts on those science cases. And so you can use the DP0 images to do your own experiments, is the approach that I've been taking.
Thank you. I think that's a very valuable approach and point. Good. So I don't see any raised hands. Do we have anything on Slack? So it's a very beautiful day. We have another 20 minutes before we serve coffee here, but perhaps you want to take a stroll or relax for a few minutes. We'll see you back here at 11:15 with an in-kind process talk by Aprajita Verma. Yes!